In this video, I'm going to go ahead and try to wrap up this whole subject on post-processing effects. There's a lot of areas in post-processing effects that you can jump into. One of the main important things that post-processing effects are used for is things like color correction. Okay, now for a very, very long time, color correction has been kind of a staple of the visual effects and film industry. Lots of movies, if not all movies, use some form of color keying, color grading, color correction, different things like that. For example, if you look at a movie like The Matrix, you'll notice that a lot of shots in The Matrix are kind of done in green, mainly the shots that take place inside the Matrix, shots that take place outside the Matrix, like on the ship in the real world. You'll notice that it's not really completely green anymore. It has more of a bluish hue to it. That's because the directors, I guess, wanted to emphasize the green color and kind of symbolize that with the Matrix, with being inside the world of the Matrix, to give the viewer a kind of a visual cue, so the viewer knows when the movie's taking place in the Matrix and when it's not. So that's one good example. And there's other movies that use different types of color correction. You notice some movies have a yellowish tint to them, some movies have a greenish tint, some have a bluish tint. So it varies from movie to movie based on what the director wants and so on and so forth. In recent years, AAA games and next-gen titles have been using post-processing effects to do color correction on games. So there's games that use color correction to achieve a certain type of look that kind of differentiates it, sets it apart from other games. Games that do this are games like Gears of War. Killzone 2 is a game that uses color correction to get its own type of look. Okay. In Unity 3, we have the ability to do color correction. It's been there before Unity 3, but we now have a better, more professional, I guess I would call it, ability to do color correction. So let me show you how that works. Let me go ahead and collapse the sun shafts there. I'm going to select the main camera, go to Component Image Effects, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look here, and we have two color correction image effects. We have the curves and the ramp. The ramp is a pretty decent one. That's kind of the old one, but it doesn't give you a lot of control. I don't recommend using it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not broken. It works pretty well. But I prefer to use the curves option, as this one gives you more control over the color correction in your scene. In fact, I would say that the curves method is more on par with more professional techniques that are used in the industry for visual effects and for film. Okay, so I'm going to use that one. I'm going to expand it out, and we have ourselves some pretty simple settings, and that's because we're in the simple mode. Okay, but as usual, I like complicating things and using the advanced mode. So in the advanced mode, we get a lot more settings. So let me go over some of these settings and show you by example what they do and give you a good idea of how to work with them. This can get a little, not too complicated, but if you don't really know what you're doing, you can get kind of lost very easily. Okay, so basically what we have is a red, green, and blue channel. This is for the overall color correction. Then we have a red, green, and blue for the depth. In case you were wondering what the depth is, very quickly, the depth determines the distance from an object in your scene to the camera. And the Z curve controls the Z depth. Again, the distance from the camera to any object in the scene, objects that are far, close, anything in the scene. And then we have the selective mode, and I'll talk about the selective mode in a little while. Let's first talk about these depth channels over here. So what does this mean? We have the ability to do color correction based on how close or how far away objects in our scene are to the camera. So let me show you how this works. Right here in the game view, I want you to pay close attention to that, because as the mic changes, you're going to notice these things happening in real time. Let me take the depth here for, say, the red channel. I'm going to click on that little red line right there. That's going to open up this curve editor, and this curve editor gives me a lot of control. So by default, what we have is a curve that goes basically from 0 to 1, okay, horizontally, and a value of 0 to 1 vertically up and down. What I can do is I can select these different handles here, these points or these keys, and I can move them around. I don't recommend moving the default keys. What I recommend doing is right-clicking anywhere on the curve and hitting Add Key. If you right-click, you can add a key. And then what I can do is I can take this key and just click and drag it after I select it and move it around. And you notice as I move it around, there's changes being updated inside the game view right there. Okay, this is a very powerful tool. It takes a while to understand it. This curve is changing the way the colors are in here based on depth. So basically what I'm doing is when I take the curve down to lower values on this graph, I'm basically taking the reds away because I'm using the red curve here. This controls the red colors. That's why our scene is starting to look more blue, because I'm taking away red. So when you take the reds away, you end up introducing more blues and more cyans into your scene. You use this graph and you move it around to basically achieve the effect that you want. It takes a little bit of practice to it. It's very kind of organic. It gives you a lot of control. So if I move this up, I'll increase the reds in my scene. So you see now I have more pinks and more reddish hues. That's because I'm giving this scene more red right now by moving the graph up like this. Okay. So for example, what I'm going to do in my case, I'm going to kind of reduce the reds a little bit over here. Something like this. I can go to the greens and I can add a key there. Select this. You can see I can add some more blue, or I can add some more green. And you notice that the effect seems to be affecting the sky and not the warehouse right here. There's a reason for that. This effect right now is based on depth. That means that things that are really, really far away from the camera, like the sky, which is the furthest thing from the camera right now, is going to get the color correction. Things that are close, like the warehouse, these trash dumpsters, the street, aren't going to get any color correction. So if I go down here to the Z curve, okay, that's this white curve down here. Let me add a key. I'll take this key. I can use this to make the green get closer to the camera. You can see as I move this up, the green gets closer to the camera. So now these back walls of the warehouse over here are green, yet the dumpster, which is closer to me, is not green yet because I'm close to it. So let me close that. Let me show you this. Let me jump into the game really quick. Let me go inside the warehouse. And if my viewpoint looks a little bit weird, that's because I rotated the first-person camera controller. Okay. You'll notice that when I look at the farthest point in the warehouse over there, it looks green. And as things get closer to the camera, they no longer look green. See, when I get close to that wall back there, it fades from green to just my normal standard colors. So that's what this is for. So the effect is here for you to use if you want to. So those are the depth channels. What I'm going to do is hit the reset buttons so I can reset those depth parameters. So reset that stuff. Then we have the regular red, green, and blue. These are great up here. They do basically the same thing as these that we just saw. The only difference is that these work on the overall scene. They're not depth based, so it doesn't matter if things are close or far away from the camera. Let me go to the reds. Let me go to add key. I'm going to drop this. You see, as I start to drop the red, I start to get more green introduced into my scene. See that? And it doesn't matter if it's the street that's close to me or these buildings far away in the background. They're all just going to turn green. All right, so I'm just going to make that a little bit green right there. I kind of like that. I mean, you don't have to make it green, but I'm just going to go with this effect here. I'm going to play around with this a little bit. Get something that looks good, at least in my opinion. There's no right or wrong way of doing this. This is all, you know, based on what you think looks good for your scene. So you might like everything to look pink. Maybe I like everything to have a greenish hue to it. So here I'm looking at the inside of my warehouse in the game view, and I'm going to start to adjust and play around with these parameters, and you can watch as I work with them so you can start to understand how this stuff works. As I move this down, I take away the reds, I add some more green to this, or I can add reds. So I'm going to drop this a little bit and add a little bit more green to this. Kind of like that. I'm going to go to the green channel. Actually, you know what I'm doing? I'm actually made a mistake here. What I want to adjust is the standard colors over here. I don't want to adjust the depth. Again, I can add new keys over here. You want to play around with this. This takes some getting used to. Let me move this up over here. I'm going to add a key here to the green channel. I'm going to drop this down a bit, and what that's going to do is going to darken up my scene. I kind of want that. I want to go for like a darker scene kind of look. I'm going to go to my blue channel over here. Going to drop the blues a little bit. And that's just starting to give me like a pretty interesting look. I want to darken this up a little bit. Something like this looks pretty good. I like that kind of moody, dark look like that. Kind of gives me a gritty type of look. I like that. I'm actually a fan of that type of look. Games like Killzone 2, for example, I like that kind of dark type of look. Not that I'm a big fan of Killzone 2. I actually don't really play that game, even though I have a PS3. But I do like the graphics in it, and I like what the developers did with the graphics and the post-processing effects. I think they did a fantastic, phenomenal job, to say the least. So I'll go with something that looks like this. Looks kind of dark. I like that. Let me bring the reds in a little bit more, but I don't want to brighten this up too much. And I don't want it to look completely green either. So maybe I might drop the greens a little bit, so it brings a little bit more of that reddish hue. And that looks kind of cool. It's pretty dark, but I kind of like that. I kind of want to go for that look. So let me bring in the blues a little bit more. I can add another key over here. Maybe I'll drop the blues actually. I want to bring in those yellows a little bit more. Okay, so you can play with this for a long time and try to come up with all kinds of cool effects. And you know what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play test this real quick. That looks pretty cool. I like that. I like that kind of moody, gritty, dark type of look. I think that looks pretty cool. There's my sun. Oh yeah, the grittiness has a really nice contrast with the specularity on the street over here. So there's a nice contrast of these brights. See this? I like that contrast of the brights specular on that wall. A little bit of bloom effect right there. Yet the corners and dark areas have this really nice dark contrast. I like that. Again, that's a matter of taste. There's no such thing as right or wrong with this. This is a matter of taste and what you want to go for. Now finally, we have a selective parameter right here. If I go ahead and check that on, we have the ability to do something called color keying. And this is something that people who work in post-production and film and in visual effects will understand pretty well. Basically, we have the ability to key a color and then apply target color to the key. So essentially what that means is we can take a color. So we'll go to key color, and let's say for example we want to take the reds in our scene, and we can select the reds like this. So we can select red. Okay, so the key color that we're selecting is the reddish color here, and then we can change the reds to a target color. So we're basically replacing the reds with something else, maybe green or maybe blue. So now you can see all the reds got turned into blue. See that? So it's a pretty powerful way of keying and selecting specific colors. Let's say the yellows. Right there it's pretty obvious because the yellows, like on the crate, the floor here, the reflection basically from the sun, those are all the warm yellow colors. And I'm basically replacing them with blues. And if I really exaggerate the effect, I can end up with something really kind of funky. Okay? So why would you want to use something like that? Well, you can use it to achieve a certain visual style. Say, for example, again, off the top of my head, you're making a game where the main character maybe reaches a point where he's having maybe a flashback, you know, kind of like a Max Payne type of game or something, where the character's having a flashback, and now the player has to play in this level that's actually a flashback or in a dream of the character. And then you can do some crazy visual effects like this, and then while your player's playing this level, you can tell that the level is maybe a flashback or a memory or something like that because it looks so funky. If you look at this, it still looks interesting, but obviously it's a unique style that you can use to differentiate your player from playing in the real world or in reality compared to playing in a dream or some kind of flashback, something like that. So I'm going to do some color keying here. Maybe I'll play around with this a little bit. I kind of like that. Kind of like this, making the yellows a little bit more kind of monochromatic. But it's really cool how you can play around with this and do complete color tweaking. So you have complete control over the way that your game is going to look. And this is very important because it differentiates your game from other similar games on the market. And that's what you want to do. You want to give your game its own kind of visual style. So I kind of like this. I'm going to stick with this, kind of that dark, gritty kind of look. Okay, so this video's gone long enough. I'm actually going to do, in the next video, I'm going to finish up the post-processing effects. I'm going to show you some other effects that can even make your game look even better and take it to the next level.